Balancing your decision making, man. It gets to a point where you have to understand, what are you doing out here, in your finances, in your everyday life. Like, what are you presenting that's gonna give you an out? What are you doing that's gonna help you along your path of life? Some people didn't get the training. Some people lost the ball. Some people dropped the ball. To an extent, some people really never had the ball at all because when things come about, we're so caught up on trying to be like the next, learn with trial and error that, you know, as the old folks always say, behind the eight ball, last to the party. It was another old saying, Johnny come late. You know, you didn't get the proper training, and that's the whole thing with being to a point where you're young. When you get older, you should be making less mistakes. You know, you should been getting punished for all the things you're doing when you're young. So when you get older, you know how to make better decisions. You know, that's the thing that the age old rule about touching the hot stove. Because the stove is hot, and shout out to everybody coming in, because the stove is hot and you touch it, it will burn you. That is a instant reaction. Everybody who's touched the hot stove got that instant reaction. You know, same thing about putting something in the outlet. I was never curious about taking something and sticking in the outlet and see what happens. I knew that those outlets powered something, and there was a lot of electricity that can power a TV, power a microwave, power an iron. When I was young, I used to iron my clothes. So knowing that, it wasn't so much curiosity to do that. Even with touching the stove, I seen stuff get burnt on the stove. So therefore I knew that if I touch it, it's gonna be a problem. But you being a toddler or something, you couldn't measure that decision making skills to a degree. So therefore you had your parents or someone, that was an adult or older that was telling you things to do and not to do, you know. Even with the decision making of, little kids grabbing cups. Um, you grab a cup of liquor or something like that, and you literally would, burn your throat thinking that it's water and it's vodka or something. So just with those decisions alone, and I'm gonna be brief about this situation in Memphis, but for the most part, man, we gotta do better. We could point the fingers at everybody else, but we have to do better. You know, it's inbred. It's in the basically when it come down to it, you have a job, but you're also part of a culture. And with that being said, there's certain things that you got to focus on, and one being, doing your job right, and another, you know, have that conscious mind for the community. And most people obtain these jobs and, work to the best of their ability. There's nothing wrong with, being the best at what you do at your job, but sometimes people get lost in what the job is offering you, the opportunity. And what are you supposed to be doing versus, to the extent what you want to do. There's pump. My coach always talked about being complacent. There's people who get into a field of complacency and they would, ultimately change the rules or do things their way. So saying the least with that, you know, and even with that young man, you know, it was no need for that situation to happen, but the most he probably did was got arrested. There was no need for running or anything. But, you know, it boils down to the decisions that you make. Ultimately, you know, most of the time you deal with certain situations, a split second decision will ultimately change the course of your life, you know. But when it comes down to like big decision making on, you know, buying a house, buying a car, I, I've always told people, you know, buying a car, you kind of get a bad, you know, APR. That's rough. But if you get a bad interest rate on the house, I mean, you're looking at most cars are used to be 5 to 7 years. Now these cars are going for 10 years. I seen one where you can get a luxury car and extend your loan to 15 years. I was like, 15-year car payment. Wow, you know. And I mean, to live that life, well, look like you live that life. That's what you can do. Because there's senses to where people double the car payments to try to hurry up and pay it off. But then there's points where people try to lengthen out the car notes. So over time, they can still drive that nice car. Most time on situations, people typically, you know, trade in those cars. I know a person that trades their car in almost every 3 to 4 years, and they not even on the lease plan. They just always, you know, try to stay ahead of the curve with the latest and greatest cars. But you know, in the end, they you pay for that. You know, there's a cost for that. You know, and with most people, like I say, with those uh anywhere from 5 to 10 year um car notes, at, it's rough, but it's manageable. To but literally have a 30 year, and you could refinance it at one point, at any point, with the car and with the house, but refinancing. Sorry about that. Refinancing start your payments over, and when refinancing starts your payments over, that's like buying it all over again. So uh, depending on a 5 to 10 year mistake to a 30 year mistake, and then you have to figure out your plans on exiting. You know, you don't want to get a foreclose on the house because that'll mess up your credit. You know, it's not a market to where you want to sell it. You might end up taking a loss. You know, and just the rate is too high for you to maintain. Especially, I've seen situations to where people get something nice, nice car, nice house, and then they lose their job. You know, they basing everything on their salary, and it's them being single by themselves, and ultimately the decision, oof, it kind of hurts. You know, even the point of being single or being married. You know, when you're married, you have to think about you and your spouse, and when it gets to a degree with you being single, you have a lot of the burden on you. There's nobody to, you know, fall back on. You know, to an extent, most people still have their parents that they can lean on, but to what point that the parents actually, you know, be able to give you such money? There's some parents, they're living paycheck to paycheck, so they're not able to, you know, extend that hand like they want to. I mean, most, 'cause that's like me. I do stuff for my son, but it's mediocre. It's nothing, never nothing like extravagant. Like he's coming asking $10,000 or something. I mean, the most is like 100 or 2, and that's it. You know. But for the most part, hey, a lot of decision making. You know, when it comes to relationships, families, we have these back and forth all day about, this woman that or this man that, but ultimately you both have a balance in this. You know, when we go at the women for having too many kids, there's a situation when men have too many kids, you know. So when we go in there situations of behavior, the scale kind of tips a little bit more at certain, and honestly, if you want to be honest, it tips more towards the women and their behavior because when it comes down to it, a lot of women have more decision making in relationships. They garner the relationship whether they want to be with a man or not, to an extent for him being a person that just pays or for him just being a person that they really want to have a relationship with. And typically, I've seen this. I was actually talking to someone yesterday about this. It gets to a point to where when you're ready for love, you can call that person back and try to hopefully amend something that was broken back in the day or to an extent. Most men don't have that opportunity, you know. Yeah, there's a lot of men who make bad decisions, but more or less, when it comes down to it, ultimately, we don't make the decision of having relationships with the women. That woman has to commit herself to being in some type of form of, you know, you know, connection with you. So that's why we, typically drop the ball on that side, and those decisions that you make where you want to be with the person or just want to play around with them, because I've told this to my friends a lot as me growing up, being married young. I seen this where a lot of women would come in guys' lives and want to be, sex buddies. They call them cut buddies and stuff. And that decision ultimately boils into a relationship. And the number one thing that they always mostly say was they would never catch feelings, and boom, it happened. And that's the woman garnering that relationship with that man to where that man, yeah, he makes that decision then, but ultimately, typically the woman makes that first move. Even if a guy, try to date a woman for about 5 or 10 years, no play, then all of a sudden give him a chance. So that's where the decision boils from there. Same with a man, men have their fun, have their different women. It's not a doubt that, typically you have guys that are players that want to be players. And that's the thing. To be a player, you have to either have two things to be that woman's type or you're able to, speak to a point where, as they say, game, and that's it. Other than that, there's few men that have those, values and characteristics to, garner these type of relationships that most people say that men are, you know, because if that was the case, every man would get any woman they want. So there's a certain look that most women look for when dealing in relationships. I mean, it's understandable. We know this. So that's why most men look at the decision of not being with women and not getting a chance ultimately drops in their hand, you know. And I always say this, I really don't have a dog in the fight. I'm married, but I get it. I see the balance and the unbalance, side of this, you know, and ultimately it boils down to the decision of, the woman wanting a certain type of lifestyle and the man wanting a certain type of lifestyle. Because at the end of the day, we all want happiness, but to an extent, what are we willing to go forth, you know, and possibly deal with for our happiness? Because going into relationships, nothing is 100. You might have a man that pays all the woman's bills, but he feel as if he should cheat because he's doing everything, you know, and that poses that question too. That if the man is doing everything, then that woman has to ask, What, like, that ultimate thing, what are you bringing to the table? You know, because if he can take care of the bills, and I'll take me for instance, I can cook, I can clean, I cook and clean when I wasn't married, I cook and clean right now when I'm married. I don't pay all the bills, but to an extent, if I were to pay all the bills, then what? Then that leaves my wife to do what? Because we both cook and clean, we both, let's say I just pay all the bills, she don't do nothing but stay at home. Do I have the right to, cheat when I want? That's a decision me and her have to make, you know. And ultimately, if she don't like that, then she can leave. But most people they'll let that man make that decision to do that simply because they don't want to go nowhere. They don't want to work. I've seen in most cases. I was having this discussion on Conscious channel, Conscious Morals channel yesterday, and we was talking about that. I think Love and Hip Hop. I, he told me it was on Love and Hip Hop where a young guy and the woman was arguing about having a $250,000 wedding, and the guy was like, "I'll go to the courthouse." She was like, "Well, I'm not a courthouse woman," and she wants to spend 250,000. She was talking about if you broke, just say you broke, and then the decision came down to if I leave you, then we'll see who's broke because being with him, she hasn't worked in 10 years, you know, and it boils down to that decision. This guy said, "Well, I can cheat right now for one. We're not married. I pay all the bills. You haven't worked in 10 years." So he has more of a leverage and lean to do whatever he wants in a relationship. But it kind of goes to why. If I plan on getting married, and I want to have an open marriage, what's the point of getting married? What's the point of spending all the money for the wedding and taking vows and going out to the court doing all this paperwork because it can also flip on you. That woman knows she has all the situation to go to court with if she decides, well, I don't want to be married no more. He's been cheating. Look, these are pictures, this and that. Same thing with the woman. The woman can say, well, you know, I mean, with the man, same thing with the man. The man can sit here and say, I just don't want to be married. I do everything. I don't need you. So, like I said, it boils down to decisions because ultimately, when you have, I seen this on the Daily Wrap Up Crew when they was asking the women about what are they bringing to the table, and that was a crazy thing. Hey, see what you say, Queena. But when it come down to it, it's the balance in the whole situation. A lot of us we tend to want everything. Like there's men who don't work. Their women pay all the bills. Their women take care of things. And when it comes down to a degree, what happens? That man feels a certain type of way when he can't get what he wants, but he's not working. He's not doing anything to move the family forward because he's put his wife in a position to run the house. And then you go back to that scenario with what's her name? Gabrielle Union. Is it okay for a woman to cheat because she's paying all the bills? Because if we say it's okay for a man, then it should be okay for a woman, right? And that so-called what is it, gender roles, to where you know uh, the woman's entitled to run stuff because she pays the bills like the man, or you're gonna stay with the tradition to where if the man is the man, he's the head of the household no matter what. you know, and that's what we always spark these conversations and talk. Is the man still the head of the household because he pays the bills? Yeah, I mean, because it gets kind of shaky when you have these conversations. Because looking unbiasedly between men and women and going down the line logically, you know, and I had one of these. There was a talk on the Roger Report. I was over there one day, and there was a situation where this little young girl was trying to bring this guy, and most people have seen this, a ring doorbell where the little girl was trying to bring a little boy in the house, and the dad caught her on the ring doorbell, and we was having a conversation about it because the girl was putting a key in or a code to get in the front door. And so you hear her talking to somebody say, no, don't come in behind me. Wait a little bit and then come in behind me. But you got to hurry up, whatever. And so the boy steps back. The dad just so happened to looking at the ring was like, hey, who that at my door? And she was like, nobody. And, he starts clowning and cussing out about, trying to let a boy in the house. And ultimately, you have that decision where it's a balance like this. That young girl is about to put herself in a situation to where she probably can potentially have a baby or, have sex because she's already knowing the rules of engagement by sneaking this boy in the house with a father that's in that home. So by her sneaking the guy in the house, she knows it's not allowed, you know. And for the father to catch her, that's gonna be even more of a burden and a punishment towards her. But that was the decision that she ultimately wanted to make, And the guy was like, "Well, what if the boy, put her up to it?" And I kind of I was joking about it, but still, it was to be true that if your daughter is out here trying to sneak a boy into your house, 9 times out of 10, like they say, she's already for the streets. That's a bad decision making on her part. That's a bad decision making on the young boy's part. Both of them still young. I understand trying to experience life, but you sneaking in someone's house is not a good look. And for her to do it at the front door, she could have went to the back door. I guess they have cameras all throughout the house or something to a degree. I got cameras in my house. I got a Ring doorbell, got a camera in my living room, one in the office. So it picks up. I got sensors on the doors, motion sensor in the hallway, and basically it's for protection when I'm not home. All my stuff is powered through Google to the point where I have what are those Google hubs in my house. I could use them as intercoms to drop in and talk to my kids in the room and in the living room. So that's why I got them as really efficient. If I want to watch a video on cooking or something like that, it's just efficient that way. But back to the decision making. That young girl, she could have, messed up her whole life with putting that young guy in a position to come in that house. Because, like I said, if that father was there, luckily he seen them on the ring, and it didn't get to the point where they could have escalated to get fucked. I know young girls who did that. Luckily, they didn't get pregnant, but their virginity was taken. The guy, lied to them about certain things about that situation, which they were gonna mess around. And there were instances where the young lady probably, you know, went with a group of guys and it turned for the worse. But then, like I said, ultimately, you can talk about the young men what they did, but then you also have to talk about that young girl's decision and her behavior because she put herself in a situation knowing that her parents probably didn't raise her like. Now, to a degree, it's not. it's not to a point of good, but it's understandable if you grew up in a situation, where you had parents that wasn't, able to talk to you, or you were able to talk to your parents. Or you were in a situation where your parents, kind of put you in a point of, you know, not being able to lean on anything. I, and I get that, because you have situations to where it just when it comes to the parents, some parents are not there. Some parents are focusing, whether to be father or mother. Some parents are focusing on their life and living it better than trying to take care of their kids. And so I get that standpoint when a person does something like that, but especially a young lady. But to a degree, when you're doing this stuff mainly because your friends or you just, just having this hot girl summer or something, and you literally have parents that will not take this, then that boy is strictly down on you. Even as the men, same thing for the men. Like I say, it's a balance. The young man knows that, you mess with this woman, you get her pregnant, your mom and your dad is gonna have to, bear the burden of all the payments, doing things for that child until you get up age to start paying child support and handling your responsibility. You know, because we hear the notion of young men having sex early, getting out there, and having fun and experiencing life. Uh, and me and Conscious was talking about that. That his dad said that he picked the right woman to the point where he knew if anything he couldn't take care of that child, that the woman would be the best fit for taking care of that child. That decision making is not like that, nowadays. Guys are literally just having sex to the point where, you know, hey, she fine. Women too. Women are literally having sex with guys to the point where, man, he look good. I once heard a lady, she said that she wanted to have a man's kid because he had tattoos. And I always tell people that story, and it gets kind of rough to the ears when people hear that. I'm like, yeah, literally, she wanted to have a man's kid. Never met the guy, just seen the guy walking through the apartment. And she literally was like, man, I want to have that dude kid. He all tatted up. Those were her exact words. Because he's tatted up. And then it started making me think my environment, like, what am I doing over here? What am I doing around it? And I'm like, most of the time I was at work. I didn't I didn't associate with most of the people I stayed around. I mean, I barely do that now, but the neighbors I have now, they're older, so they typically like the older people I knew back in the day. They say they greet you and then they stay to themselves. Now if there's a situation erupts and they know that, you do this and do that, they can come ask for a hand and, you know, so forth and therefore. But other than that, typically keep to themselves, you know. But I mean, just saying the least, man, that the decisions, I was gonna take this topic all the way into something else, but like I said, with the decision making between men and women, it's ultimately on us. We can't blame nobody else, you know, and going into, men and the situation about relationships to a degree. Everybody wants somebody, but there's always somebody for you. You have to, you know, expand your horizon. Most men will only date in a circle. You know, out of the whole universe that we stay in, most men typically try to date in a circle, and that's where they fall short at. Same thing with women. Most women typically date I would say in the triangle, because as far as the circle, men would almost to a degree take any woman that looks good to their eye, or even that that's a little more compassion that they can work with. Because I done seen some guys that I wouldn't say that girls are ugly, but they're less attractive on the eye than most. But at the same time, it's somebody for everybody. Same thing with the women. They mess with guys that are you know look a certain way, and you question like, how did this relationship come about? Most people typically say, well, he must have had money for that woman to deal with him. But hey, it always depending on the feeling in that person. But going back to the triangle part, you know, most of the women deal in that triangle because they have a peak. They have a peak at which certain things they will accept, certain things they will deal with, and each corner has those main key points. You know, Men, that circle is mainly dealing with sex, looks, and I would say, well, those are the main two in the circle: sex, looks, and the communication. Right? You have to be to a point where we can, get to an understanding and some level, with each other. But the women has those key points where they don't want to stir from. They need the money, they need the protection, the look. Those are the main four corners. And going into the middle of the triangle, they focus on certain degrees of what, you know. So I mean, placing that circle over that triangle, it always tends to be a problem because if you don't look the part, you don't get access to the relationship. I mean, that's the same for men. Men are not just gonna date anybody, but then there are some men that just want somebody. And like I said, it goes back and forth to the point where a lot of people don't move out of their areas. And I've always talked about how I did all I've traveled all 48 states, been out of the country, and majority of the time, I never really hear people say that they travel so much to different states. Like a guy in Georgia will not be the same in Iowa or Texas. Southern, you might get that southern state to where you get, put in a certain category of type. But then you might go Midwest and you're different. Or you might go out west and then you're in another bracket. There was a guy I know from Georgia. He went over to California, ended up dating a Chinese woman. Loved her, liked her. He said, man, I could have married this chick. But I wanted to come back to Georgia and, marry within my race and figured that I wasn't desired as much. They deal with me, but I wasn't desired as much. And it put him in the mindset to say, man, I missed out on my opportunity for my wife. And like I said, guy went to California and found his wife. Whereas you have people in Georgia, the city of Atlanta, they won't go outside the city of Atlanta just to find a woman to talk to. This guy went to Cali. That's why I say, man, you got to step outside your circle. I know people back in the day that they never left probably within a 50-mile radius. Well, I would say, yeah, I would say about a 50-mile radius because it depends from the side to the city. But the pretty much the perimeter of Atlanta and probably 20 miles or so, 15 to 20 miles outside the city of Atlanta. That's how far they went. You know, most people, the farthest they've been is like an hour ride outside of Atlanta, Macon. Um, let's see, now almost close to Alabama, but mostly Macon. That's the farthest most people went outside the city. And with me looking, the crazy part about traveling all 48, I tell people I've been to this state, been to that state, I did this and that. I ate barbecue here. I went to the movies here. I went to a car show here. You know, with me always traveling with my job, I was always meeting new people, meeting new ladies, talking with them. It's different in others. It's just completely different, you know. Especially when I went to Alabama, like the hospitality for most women, they smile, they'll sit there and talk with you and deal with you in a certain way. I mean, of course, that's their job, but to an extent, you can tell the difference between a person being kind because of their job and going the extra mile, you know, like giving you extra napkins, you know, but going the extra mile to kind of get you more comfortable. And in most cases, hey, that decision for them to be a little nicer can ultimately, spark most people into a relationship. You know, you have these restaurants where certain people typically always go to, your regular customers. Some people don't date within their work, some people do. You know, there's some good people that you can, deal with, but a lot of people don't really take the chance on this person because they not their prototype. You know, a lot of people tend to not garner that relationship, and ultimately, it makes a bad decision for you long term. You know, and going back and on decision making, there's a lot of people who lose out on good relationships because why? That decision to, you know, date outside of their norm sometimes makes them a better person and better in relationship as well because why? You typically would have an issue with a person, that same prototype that looks this way, acts this way, or come off this way, and when you date outside the norm, hey, you got a totally different outcome. But saying the least, man, I'm about to get off of here. Hey, make your decisions, make them well. Have an understanding what you want to do with your life. Have an understanding, you know, ultimately your decisions can, garner you being married or single. Your decisions ultimately can garner you having the best life, the best opportunity, or just what? Nothing, you know? So, like they say, pick and choose your battles. And hopefully, you pick the right battle and be victorious in the win. With that being said, I always say, we here and we gone.